Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From pauper leagues to top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 108 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, and as always, I'm joined by our co-host, Brad. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, guys. Good, Christian. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Oh, that's funny. Before we got too far into this episode, I just wanted to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you wanted to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel and check out our Patreon. That out of the way, let's get on to the show for the week.
Yay!
Yeah, I think, Brad, you had something that you wanted to shout out before we got into the main topic?
I did. I know it was no big secret. Everybody was kind of talking about it, but MTGO player Hamuda, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Hamuda, last weekend took down Saturday and Sunday's challenge with 4-color affinity. I just wanted to give him or her or they a shout out. That's really freaking awesome. I know you see regular players. If you pay attention to the MTGO challenges especially, you see a lot of regular players show up there, but it's pretty rare to go back-to-back first place. I think that's quite a feat, especially with everything going on, all the changes and everything else that's happened lately. So I think that was really awesome. I don't know if you wanted to look at the list at all. It's a pretty straightforward list, but I definitely wanted to shout him out for that. That was a really excellent accomplishment.
The 4-color affinity deck, it was mostly just like a meld of like the Teamer and the Jessica affinity deck, right? And they were also playing Fall from Favor, if I'm not wrong.
Correct. Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah, no, it's super, super awesome. It's super hard to win or even top 8 like one of those. The fact that somebody won like 2...
Yeah.
Like on back-to-back days, you know, it's not like they were a week apart or anything like that. It was like they woke up one morning and played the Pauper Challenge, and they woke up the next morning and played the Pauper Challenge, and they did it all day, both days. So, congrats to them.
Yeah, they kicked ass both days. Yeah, they didn't have a week in between to tune their deck and figure this out and these matchups. They just got back at it both days. I have the deck pulled up if you want me to run through it real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
It's a little bit different than I actually expected. We'll start with the creature package, 19 creatures, 2 Ardent Recruits. That's the one single white for a 1/1 with Metalcraft. It's +2/+2 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. 4 Thraben Inspector, 4 Atog, 3 Core Skyfisher, 2 Frogmite, and 4 Mirror Enforcer. Pretty stock package after the recruit there, I think. The spell package, 4 Galvanic Blast, 2 Fling, and 4 Thought Cast. Pretty tight package right there. Just removal and draw, and then your typically your win condition there with your Atog and your Fling. Some more artifacts, your mana producers, cantrips, typically 4 Quivering Leaf Drums and 4 Prophetic Prism. And then there you go. The next one down, 3 enchantments are the 3 Fall from Favors. The engine of everything right now.
Yeah, are there any like interesting cards in their sideboard or anything, or is it mostly pretty stock?
But yeah, it's pretty stock. Elemental Blast, Dispel, Gorilla Shamans, Kark Clan Shamans, Red Elemental Blast, Shenanigans, 2 Fiery Cannonades. That's nice, and then 1 Reaping the Graves. So fairly stock list. We see a couple Commander Legend cards in here, but yeah, the notable ones: the Fall from Favor and Fiery Cannonade in the board, I believe.
Okay, yeah. Again, shout out to them.
Yeah, it's a good list, good tight list.
Yeah.
So yeah, Hamuda, if you're listening, congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. But anyways, I guess now
Yeah,
we
that's
can.
all I really had for the upkeep.
Yeah, I guess we can move on to what decks we've been playing this past week. If you wanted to lead us off.
Yeah, I haven't been doing a lot of meta play leagues or anything like that, but um, I was brewing a red and green landfall deck, sort of a Christmas landfall deck, if you will. It was pretty fun. It wasn't super great. Most landfall decks aren't super great, but it was a lot of fun. It did a lot of things. It did everything I wanted it to do, but it doesn't do it on a high enough level to really go anywhere in a competitive sense, I guess. Um, it tore up the open play room, though. I guess that's an accomplishment. So, yeah, it's just your straight up red green landfall deck, nothing crazy. I was using the Zendikar Rising, the Akum Hellhound, the 1-drop, 0/1 with landfall +2/+2 until the end of turn for a single red. He was good. Um, my second version of this is the one I actually posted. I put in 4 Arboreal Grazers strictly because, well, I like the fact that it's an 0/3 with reach. It'll buy you some time if you're up against, I don't know, some weak flyers, or it'll buy you a turn against Delver or what have you. But it also ramps you too. It'll give you the early ramp, and then a little bit later in the game, if you need an extra landfall trigger, this guy will get you there as well. I did like that. And then pretty much all the other creatures you'll find in every other red green landfall deck. McKendy Slide Runners, Geopedes, Sakura Tribe Elder, Snapping Gnarlids. And then my spell package is kind of what was in flux the few times I played it. I couldn't decide on crop rotation or anything like that. I've got your basic removal for some card draw, Warlord's Furies, another card draw, Vines of Vastwood for some pump, Searing Blaze for landfall removal, and then I was trying out the new Zendikar Rising Scale the Heights, that green sorcery for a green and 2. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 creature. You gain 2 life, and you may play an additional land, draw a card. It does a little bit of everything, but it is a lot slower than it actually seems like it would be. I like it when I can use it, but tapping out an entire turn to do this is not the greatest feeling in the world. So I'll probably end up taking that out and putting in something else.
Gotcha.
And then just a whole bunch of lands.
Yeah.
Well, with the fetch lands, you can get 2 triggers per turn. Bounce lands, you get multiple triggers, etc., etc.
Lands are the name of the game with that deck, I guess. So.
Right.
Well, I've again continued to play around with Fall from Favor. Like I said, I think the card is like a rather fun card.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I've been trying to like play this like weird like blue green amalgamation. I don't know if you remember the like old like mono blue like creature beatdown deck with like Phantasmal Bear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I basically
like a deck kind of.
yeah, so like I've been trying to play the like Burning Tree Emissary, like Young Wolf, Nest Invader, that sort of thing, and just put like a few blue cards and Fall from Favor in it, just to like see how it would play. Not very good. Fun.
Okay.
It's nice when you do your thing. It's just
Not-
oftentimes doing
not
your
very good.
thing involves like Burning
Yep.
Tree Emissary, Young Wolf, and no blue cards whatsoever. So it's like it's like whenever you do
Yep.
your thing, you're mostly just doing another deck's thing, just less consistently.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just taking an already established deck and making it a little worse. I do
Right.
that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone that's played Pauper has had like at least 1 or 2 of those ideas where it's like, you know, I'm gonna play Boggles, but I'm also gonna like play like Core Skyfishers and stuff like that, and it just like meld these 2 archetypes till it's neither one of them, and it's worse than both.
Yeah. Yep. I did that over the summer with I tried to build this mono red Burning Prophet type red control deck, and I just kept getting beat with it and beat with it and beat with it, and then I kept changing it and changing it, and about 3 weeks later I looked at it one day and I thought, this is just burn with Burning Prophet. Why don't I just play burn? You know. So I took those out and it was burn. Imagine that.
Yep.
So it's funny the traps you put yourself in, you don't even realize it.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's like always like this like incredibly unintentional thing, right? Where like you start with something way off of an archetype, and you refine it more, and you're starting to feel like you're getting somewhere. You're like, man, maybe I'm pretty good at this brewing thing, and then like you just realize that
Yeah.
you basically just built like a deck that was even like either like a meta like a couple months ago, or just like even a meta deck sometimes, and you're like, oh,
Uh-huh. Yep. Life of a brewer.
Speaking
It's
of
not a
the
pretty one.
life of a brewer, the main topic for this week is that we basically wanted to talk about a few deck ideas and maybe expand on some with the specific top goal in mind of going after Fall from Favor and cards that commonly come along with it. I'm thinking like Counterspell, stuff like that. Um, yeah, so I think that there are like
Yeah.
probably tons of good options, and then there are some options that I could see arguments to why they would think that they like someone would think that they were good, but I don't think that they are good. The main example of that one is one that I even suggested that we talk about, Black Red Reanimator, where it's like
Yes.
I felt like that deck was like, okay, like this is a deck that can get pretty grindy, especially post board, which is pretty good against the like blue red Fall from Favor decks and can be good against Tron, and it can also have those like explosive wins.
You said that that's a deck you're pretty familiar with, right?
Yeah, that's a deck that I'm very familiar with. I played a lot of it a couple months ago. That was like the only deck that I played for maybe like 3 straight weeks, where it was like I was just trying out different sideboard plans, different main board plans. I was really trying to get a good feel for like the range of opening hands that you can keep against certain decks, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's like one of those things that before Fall from Favor, one of the ways that you would sort of beat the blue-red deck, for example, is that you would basically mulligan really hard into a hand that would basically have like either a way to sort of keep them from being able to tempo you out, so like your minimal amounts of removal, stuff like that, or just a really solid explosive start. And one of the things with the first one, where if like you kept like minimal amounts of removal and a little bit of interaction, you would always try and close with a card that they had a hard time beating, which was either Gurmag Angler or just playing like a Stinkweed Imp over and over. But now Fall from Favor doesn't put your Stinkweed Imp into your graveyard, and it answers the one card that Lightning Bolt has trouble with, which is a Gurmag Angler. So it does double duty in hitting both of your grindy ways to keep up with that deck. So that's that makes that deck a lot more rough against that one in particular. And the deck never really had a very good Tron matchup outside of the explosive hands. So those are like the 2 of the top decks right now. So
Yeah, exactly. I haven't played a lot with Reanimator decks. I like them. I like the theory behind them. But yeah, every time I've played against one, it's either they're doing nothing or they're beating me on turn 2.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very much a linear format combo deck, in my opinion, anyway. You're either gonna win off a series of 2 or 3 cards in a row, or you're gonna struggle pretty hard.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
What are you, when you're looking at these Fall from Favor decks? I guess we'll just call them that for the time being. These Monarch decks, Fall from Favor decks, what have you. When you're looking at those, what are you trying to attack? Obviously, Enchantment Hate's not going to do anything.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is like
even creature removal to a certain extent won't do anything.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? Is this card is just one of those cards that slots so neatly into most decks without having to change your overall game plan that much. Because most decks in Pauper have some amount of removal in them, which this card can take the place of. And typically, every deck in Pauper, outside of a few, are mostly centered around gaining sort of like incremental card advantage, which this one also does. So this card can serve double duty as removal and card advantage, which not too many cards in Pauper do. I think for the most part, that's generally true. So that's why I think this card is so popular. So for me, it's just wanting to hate more on one of the two things that this does, or both. So, for example, hating on the removal end of this card, I think, is really hard unless you're playing like proactive interaction, because it doesn't actually kill your stuff. And then hating on the like card advantage end, I think you could play like flying creatures. You could just play more creatures. You could play creatures that play other creatures. Anything like that, I think, could potentially fight this. I think that the way to go is probably some sort of like proactive interaction, or just something so aggressive that 3 mana, like spending 3 mana on a turn, isn't good no matter what for them, basically.
Right. 2 is pretty much the top of your curve there.
Now,
so yeah, if I heard that right, basically, if we were going to play a game, Spell Table, or whatever, MTGO, and I said, hey Christian, I'm going to play a Fall from Favor deck, you're probably going to show up with something 30 plus creatures, a handful of removal, and 17 lands.
Right. That's I would show up with
as one option.
Right. I would show up with something like that, or I might show up with something that's like, I don't know, the old like blue black decks where it was like the Chittering Rats, like Handlock deck with like Ghostly Flicker and stuff like that. Like I might play something like that, or just something with like Duress, something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I like the avenue of hand destruction against the current meta. I don't know how good it would be or is, but anytime that I think hand disruption is good, I'm a fan of it. So,
right,
I'm willing to play that.
So if you were to go down
the rat locks, the hand disrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can keep going.
Oh, that's okay. I was just, you mentioned like the rat locks, and then we got on the hand disruption. That sort of ties into sort of a red-black attack, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So if you were to go down the like red-black, I guess, like rabbit hole, you also get a couple of other pretty good cards. I say like pretty good. The like staple of the format, obviously, like you get like tons of lightning bolts. But then you also get to play like fiery cannonades somewhere, stuff like that. So I think that's actually a pretty good starting place.
Yeah, I think it is too, and I don't even mind playing something like a cannonade in the main board with the rats. Because in my opinion, as long as the rats do their job once, you kind of got their value out of them.
Yeah,
it's nice to have that body stick around, but as long as you get that one lock, it's fine.
Yeah, so I will say that like if I were doing something like this outside of the rats, I would want to be pretty creature light, because another way to beat Fall from Favor is to just not have good targets for it. Like I've seen like a few like memes on Twitter of like people playing Fall from Favor on their own creatures just to become the Monarch. And it's like, that's funny, but I think we can all acknowledge that that's usually just not good. And so like if you could just put your opponents in that situation where they're having to do something not good, or just have a card that does nothing, that would also be pretty good. That being said, that does necessitate you know what I'm trying to say, having some sort of like non-creature win condition, because if you run a really creature light deck with just Gurmag Angler, then it's like you have turned off their Fall from Favors until it matters most, which is when you're trying to win the game. So I think if you go with a creature light deck, you would want to find some way outside of the normal ways of winning Magic to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. It has it has changed the game quite a bit. In what, 2 weeks, we're looking at a whole new style of play, a whole new set of rules. It seems like.
Yeah. And I do want to say this is like I think most people's main problem with the card is that not only are we doing like a whole podcast episode of like things that we could do to fight this card, it seems like a lot of the things that we could come up with of like how do we fight this card, you could easily like justify splashing that like fall from favor in your deck because it achieves those goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's probably the most frustrating thing about the card for me. But like I said, the card's not all that frustrating for me because I think the gameplay is incredibly fun when Monarch is good in Pauper. So
Right. Right. It is frustrating. It's easy to cast. It's already in a color that's powerful. Um, it doesn't require a lot as far as color, as far as casting it. It's 1 pip and 2 colorless. That's not hard. For any deck.
yeah, but sort of getting back to the task at hand, I'm not sure what sort of like non-creature win conditions we could go with. I know that I think you and I had sort of talked about maybe like something like Curse of the Pierced Heart, or like having like Evankar's Justice plus Pristine Talisman. I'm not sure if that's actually good though. I will say that I like that because it also lines up against the other half of what I think could potentially give Fall from Favor troubles. So in that way, it sort of plays double duty of not only does it beat the top card in the meta, or one of the top cards in the meta, but then it also beats the other thing that I theorize could beat that card. But I could be off base
Which
there.
is what?
Just the like 30 creature decks where it's like just get so far under it that it doesn't matter. It's like if you have Evankar's Justice, Fiery Cannonade, and a few other pieces of removal like Terminate or Lightning Bolt, that's a really good way to interact with those decks and sort of slow them down enough. And then whenever your win condition is something like a board wipe, it's really going to keep those decks down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think you are on the right track there. And I've always been a fan of creatureless or very creature-light decks anyway. But I think they may be good, potentially good in this current meta.
Yeah, for sure. I will say the other half of this though is I've sort of been talking about the like base blue, blue red, sometimes blue black, fall from favor decks. There are the other ones though that are like the Tron decks that are playing fall from favor and stuff, that I think you could still really struggle with just because those decks play so differently. And so I would want for like Tron and stuff to probably have just a really solid sideboard plan. And even then, I'm not sure if you could get there.
Yeah, how would, like you said, we chatted about this a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned the old school or the old Mystical Teachings decks. How did those, I know Tron was a different animal back then, but what was the game plan then with facing a Tron deck?
So for me, it was always like, one of the things is like both decks were, super good at basically just grinding out card advantage. Then they were playing like Forbidden Alchemy and a few Mystical Teachings, and you had your 4 Mystical Teachings, your accumulated knowledges. A lot of times, I would just try and use my mana really efficiently in the early game to set up. I might even mulligan somewhat aggressively for an early like a Mystical Teachings or like a Curse of the Bloody Tome. That way, whenever like the end game came into play, it was all about who had more counter spells, who could use their mana better. And granted, they had a lot more mana than we did, but back then they were playing not the most efficient cards. And, they were playing like 3-piece win conditions that they wanted to resolve 2 of them in the same turn a lot of times. So it was a little bit easier.
Yep.
I would say with the red-black decks, the biggest trouble is that you don't really have like counter spells. So you would want to have some other form of disruption to, again, like they still have tons of card advantage. So you would want ways to keep them low on cards, I think. And then maybe like disrupt their mana while you're going. Or you could even have like a more aggressive sideboard plan. I think there's a bunch of ways to do it. I don't know which one's best. And this would probably be where I would defer to you as you're our resident red-black expert.
Okay.
I don't know. Whenever you brew a red-black deck, what what sort of sideboard plans have you had success with against decks like Tron?
Honestly, I just approached Tron differently. For a while, I was on the land destruction in your sideboard plan that everyone seemed to be on, where if you were worried about running into Tron, you had 2 Stone Rains and some Molten Rains and choking sands and all these other things in there that I just found to be too slow, honestly. So what? You spent 3 mana, you may have done 2 damage to him and blown up a land. Well, so what? Next turn they're going to have another Tron piece in play, and all you really did was time walk yourself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't really a lot productively that you did. So for me, anyway, what worked, I want to say better, but what worked for me was just trying to be, against Tron specifically, trying to sideboard into something a little more aggressive, something faster maybe, having a few extra burn spells in the sideboard, maybe an extra haste creature, anything like that, anything to go upstairs, face damage without doing combat, I guess is the generally the way I would sideboard against Tron.
Gotcha.
Because I always played not necessarily against their mana, but against the Flickers and the Denrovas and the Stonehorns and all that nonsense. So I was looking for more ways to get straight damage through, as opposed to how am I going to beat their mana.
Gotcha. So did that normally include, I know, again, before the show when we were sort of talking about ideas, you had mentioned playing like Blightning or something. Would that be one of the matchups where you would really try and lean into the concept of Blightning? Or maybe you would go turn 1 Duress, turn 2 some card, turn 3 Blightning, and then, turn 4, I don't know, Thorn of the Black Rose or a Rat or something like that? Or would it have to be even more aggressive?
Yeah,
than
generally,
Blightning?
that's as sad as it is to say, I think it may have to be something more aggressive than Blightning. It is a very powerful card. 3 damage and the ability to have them discard 2 cards is very strong. Don't get me wrong, I love the card, I always have. But with the amount of card advantage we're facing and the amount of counter spells we're facing, it just feels bad to dump a whole turn 3 into something that just fizzles. I don't know if it's just because I've played black-red so much in my life, but if I'm facing a black-red deck, on turn 2 or 3, I'm automatically expecting a Blightning. You know what I mean? I'm expecting that to come at me, so I'm leaving mana open for it. Maybe not in game 1, but games 2 and 3 for sure.
Yeah, so with that being said, if something like Blightning isn't working, could we maybe have just repeatable sources of damage in our sideboard for Tron specifically, where it's I know that we mentioned maybe having Curse of the Pierced Heart against them, but maybe we could sort of go into having more of those, or maybe Thermo Alchemist, because that sort of Thermo Alchemist, for example, sort of fits not having too many creatures in your deck anyways, to where every hand attack spell represents 1 damage to sort of keep them off of their game plan and have more targeted hand disruption still. I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of having you could use bounce lands, and if you brought in your Thermo Alchemist, then all of a sudden you could play Raven's Crime, and then your Raven's Crime every time you discarded a land, played that, it was just another 1 damage to them. I think
I love Raven's Crime.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty good against them, because also from the Tron seat, almost creatureless red-black is probably one of the decks that I'm siding out cards like Fall from Favor, just because it's, they're almost creatureless. You probably have more card advantage than them anyways, and then all of a sudden, there's a Thermo Alchemist just doing 2 to 3 damage every turn that they get to play cards. That could be something good. there is always just the disrupt, like use like pyroblast to disrupt like their main game plan so much, and then just find a way to win later. Normally, I don't like doing stuff like that against Tron specifically, because that deck has so many ways to basically just hold off until it knows it can win through anything. That seems to be a relatively ineffective game plan against them, I found.
I do like one thing I always did when I was brewing up a black-red deck is I would either slam in a play set of Thermo Alchemist or none at all. If I wanted to go more aggressive, it was definitely a good choice. I liked it. I do have a question though, possibly a rules question for you.
Okay.
With Fall from Favor, I don't know why I'm blanking on this. If they put Fall from Alchemist, can you still untap it when you cast a spell?
Yeah, so what does Fall from Favor specifically say? Surprisingly, I haven't ran into this yet.
I got it.
Go for it.
I got it right here. Enchant creature. When Fall from Favor enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature and you become the monarch. Enchanted creature does not untap during its controller's untap step unless that player is the monarch.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely untaps. So maybe we could just play this in our main deck as like instead of Curse to the Pierced Heart, as like our win condition, I guess.
That's what I'm thinking.
Is like, and you, for the record, you could still probably do like the main deck Wraths with this card, of like 1 or 2 Cannonade and like maybe 1 or 2 Evankar's Justice as like a long game win condition. Because most of the time, Thermo Alchemist isn't good against the type of decks that those cards are good against anyways, so it doesn't matter that there's not that much synergy between the two.
Right, and a Cannonade won't kill the Alchemist anyway.
Right, because it's a 1/3, right?
It's a 0/3.
0/3.
Yep.
Oh, then Evankar's Justice also doesn't kill it. Just ignore me, guys.
Right. Hey, it's the life of a brewer.
Right.
A lot of math involved.
No.
Yeah, I think just like you were saying, the key to, maybe not the key, but one of the approaches to a meta like this or to a card like Fall from Favor is to either try to disrupt what they're going to do or what you think they're going to do, or just be super aggressive. I don't think there's really anywhere you can fall in between if you're not just going to pick up a meta deck and play it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're going to try to brew something, it needs to be one or the other.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Now, on that topic, I know that we sort of talked about the black-red control decks. I think all of the shows that we talked about have their own like merits, whether it's Thermo Alchemist, Curse of the Pierced Heart. On the other end, is there a way to get aggressive that is outside of the like current meta decks? That's like a genuine question that I have, I guess, because like I said, I had been playing around with the blue-green like beatdown deck, and that appeared to just be like really bad mono-green aggro. So I'm just wondering, is there like merits to playing something like I don't know, like a mono black aggro or something like that?
That is a good question. I am not excuse me. I am not a super mono black aggro player. I do like those types of decks. Usually if I play a mono black deck, I'm going to go more towards the black burn or mono black rogues, whatever you want to call it, with the changing outcast and the morsel theft and that sort of life drain effect, as well as creature damage. That's not a true mono black MBC mono black troll deck, but I think something like that could have results, but it may be reliant on how fast you can get those creatures down, because a lot of those spells don't really matter until you get creatures down. There may not be a high enough density of those black drain / burn spells to do anything if you can't get in with your creatures turn 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me.
What's that?
I, I was basically just saying that makes pretty good sense to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I hope so. I felt like I rambled a little bit.
yeah, no. It definitely followed. It had a logical conclusion. Yeah. So I will say that there are some maybe like I don't want to call them former meta decks, but decks that may have like fallen out of favor. No pun intended. I think you made that joke recently as well. Um, but
Yeah, I think I did.
one of them specifically is the like mono white like beat down heroic deck. Um, One of the
Mm-hmm.
issues with that against Fall from Favor specifically is the fact that sometimes like you go all in on one creature that Fall from Favor just sort of interacts with, and that can put you in a bind. I will say that
Sure.
that deck has the ability to sometimes main deck enchantment removal. I'm blanking on the card's name, but it's the 1 mana. It either like gains life, pumps your guy, or removes an enchantment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is, I believe, yes, Light of Hope,
Light of Hope. So
Mycoria.
because you could potentially play a card
They,
like, oh, go on.
it's one white. I'll go ahead and read it. It's one white for an instant. It's a modal card. You get to choose one. You can gain 4 life. You can destroy target enchantment or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
Because you get to play something like that in your main deck, as well as still have a variety of having like quite a few creatures to play. I would say that that one wouldn't be the worst choice of something that used to be in the meta, but is sort of out of it now to attack these decks. I'm not sure if it's good, but that would be one that I would be interested in trying, and I would urge people to at least test it out, I guess.
Sure, and it's modal, so it kind of works against, it gives you that incidental life gain if you're down some or you're facing burn. Um, Target enchantment obviously is very relevant nowadays, and then it also puts a counter on one of your creatures, so it does trigger your heroic mechanic.
Mm-hmm. That's sort of like, I guess, all of the decks and everything that I had in mind. There is one deck that I think is usually pretty good anytime Pauper gets like a rotation, quote unquote, and that's Boggles. Seems like every time like we enter a new Pauper format, that deck
I
sort of
agree.
sneaks back in because I think it's just because it's so straightforward that people sort of know how to approach matchups with it
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Hmm. I agree. There's not a lot to it. It hasn't changed a whole lot. I think this year brought one, maybe two new cards to the deck that I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, it is really straightforward. It's funny. I listen to other Magic podcasts about all the formats really, and one of the things they say in standard is when there's a rotation, mono red aggro is like the go-to deck for everyone until the meta's figured out, and that sort of goes in line with what you said about Boggles. When we get these sets that introduce a whole slew of new cards to the format, to me anyway, and it sounds like to you, Boggles seems to be a good fallback for these areas of time, these 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after we get a bunch of cards in to just sort of feel out the meta, um, play straight linear decks, and just see where you end up.
Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I think sort of makes Boggles that for this format over like our Burn deck is specifically because our format is so slow that oftentimes your fallback deck needs to be something that scales well. Um, and so I think Boggles is one of those decks that like if you give it time, it's just going to scale until it beats you. And I don't think Burn does that. So I think that's what
Right.
sort of sets it apart from just the normal fallback of mono red that most formats have, I feel.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Were there any other like deck ideas that you could think of that were potentially like good against Fall from Favor or in the current meta?
I don't know. I know we talked about it before we started recording. I don't know how legitimate they are right now, but I know they're putting up some results in the leagues. But with this new cascade that seems to be everywhere, thanks to Commander Legends, We're seeing a lot of land destruction decks, mostly red and green, some mono green, some Tron variant land destruction deck that all use the Cascade mechanic. And I think a lot of that's because land destruction spells are typically expensive and typically at sorcery speed, but if you can cascade into them, I mean, that's going to put you 2 turns ahead. You know what I'm saying? If you can blow up a couple lands and get a gigantic creature out of it at the same time, or a boarding party with haste, 6 power with haste, cascade into a land destruction spell, that's just about GG's right there.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's interesting. The cascade mechanic, sort of, if you remember in the beginning, one of the things that I said that I thought made Fall from Favor so good was the fact that it did something that you wanted to do anyways, and it generated some sort of card advantage. And the cascade mechanic itself oftentimes does that, where you get another card immediately, and you're oftentimes wanting to do the other thing anyways, right? Where it's like, I want to have a 6 power creature in play. Also, I would like to have another card. And so it's interesting how I feel like both cards do that. Fall from Favor is probably the little bit more like controlling aspect of it, where it's like more like you'll see this benefit over time, whereas the Cascade decks are more like immediate results. But I think generally like the concept of what makes those good is probably the same.
Yeah, and I agree. And like you were saying, Fall from Favor is, if nothing else, it's consistent. You know what you're going to get out of it. You know how much it's going to cost. You typically know what targets you're going to put it on. Whereas the Cascade ability or mechanic, the Cascade cards that we have that everyone's playing with, they're awesome. They're great. I mean, there was one deck we were looking at before the show where they were cascading the Annoyed Altasaur into Boarding Party into something else. You can get a huge chain going. But that's just the dream scenario in my mind. What happens when you cascade into, I don't know, a 1 drop or a 1 mana artifact that doesn't do anything, that doesn't affect the board, it doesn't push forward your attack any. Your Boarding Party into a Chromatic Star. What's that do for you? There's always that inherent risk with that mechanic, I feel like.
Yeah, I generally pretty much agree. The Cascade mechanic is so high variance that it's funny now that I'm saying it out loud. That might be the true answer to beating Fall from Favor is get lucky. But I say that half jokingly, but it does feel true, right? It's like, let's do something that's highly powerful half of the time, and then hope that we hit the right half.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm actually okay with those odds, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing is that I haven't tested the Cascade decks enough to know if the best end of getting lucky is good enough to beat Fall from Favor, but I hope so.
Right. And who knows, these land destruction decks, or the one in particular I was looking at that put up a 5-0, maybe he just happened not to run into a single Fall from Favor. It is a league. It's quite possible that he ran into Bruise all day, or who knows. But I think it's something to keep an eye on. It looks fun. I'm an old school player. I like hand disruption. I like land destruction. I typically like things that piss people off, apparently, but I think it's something to keep an eye on, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything that we had for our main topic this week, then. Did you want to go into what cards we've been testing out in our sideboards, have been liking?
Okay.
Yeah. So mine isn't necessarily a card that I've played. It's a card that I saw in the sideboard of an Elves deck from one of the challenges. It is called Gruesome Fate. I believe, if memory serves, it's a 2/black.
Correct.
And then each opponent loses 1 life for each creature that you have in play. It's either loses life or deals damage.
It is loses life.
Yeah. I like this a fair bit. One of the things about the Elves deck going up against like the Flicker decks or Flickertron is that sometimes they start to lock you out of having combat steps and stuff like that. And this card is one of the ways to sort of get them by just having a bunch of creatures in play as opposed to needing a combat step. Another thing that it does is if you have like a pretty big attack, then second main you can cast this and finish them off out of nowhere. So, what about yourself?
Right, something like that. I think that is a great sideboard card, especially nowadays in the current meta. I put in the show notes that card kind of reminds me of Harsh Sustenance. I don't know if you're familiar with that card.
I'm
from
not.
Fate Reforged. It's an instant. It's black, white, and one. So an Orzhov and one colorless for an instant. Harsh Sustenance deals X damage to target creature or player, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control. So it's similar to Gruesome Fate, but you also gain the life on the back end.
Man, that card makes me want to brew like black white aggro. Sort of go into that super aggressive what we were talking about, and just have that card as like just another way to. That's a whole nother thing to talk about beating Fall from Favor.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The only reason I brought that up is it's similar to Gruesome Fate, but you said you saw Gruesome Fate in an Elves list, and one guy I follow pretty closely on Twitter. He's an MTGO grinder, and he pretty much almost every format that he can, he just plays Elves, and he's a master Elves pilot, and he plays Harsh Sustenance in his pauper sideboard for Elves, and it's won him quite a few games.
Yeah, well, tell him I said good job. And if he's listening, good job.
Okay, let's see what I picked. I don't know if it was coincidence or what, but I also picked a green card. I guess I had Elves on the brain as well. But I picked Wrap and Vigor. Instant for a green and one. Wrap and Vigor. It regenerates each creature you control. Pretty short and sweet. I feel like any deck that can splash green should probably splash green, if not just for this card, but definitely this card in the sideboard. A one of, you don't have to go crazy with it, but you may not use it every game or every match, but the one time you need it, the one time you have it in hand, it's going to win you a game for sure.
Yeah, I don't know, especially, I know that you already mentioned it, but when Fiery Cannonade is going to be brought in against you, this is like one of those concepts where you need to sideboard for their sideboard, right? And this is a card that'll do it.
Right, absolutely.
All right, well, I guess that's...
Yeah, sideboard for their sideboard. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you guys want to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JessGuyDad, and you can find Brad at pauper_B. Or you can shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg.com. If you guys had any questions on the pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, like I said, you can shoot us an email, or you can just leave a comment down below. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other, and never stop brewing.